Hey there, it's Stephanie Shea, Chief Astrologer for janspiller.com with your May Astrological Overview. There is a lot going on coming up in May. You know, the sun will be in Taurus. We always think things are mellow and calm with the sign of Taurus. That will somewhat be true. However, there's a lot of other really active astrology that will be stirring the energy. So it will be important to try to ground into that Taurus energy while we're feeling the sun shining in Taurus through May 19th. It's a good time to just catch your breath, catch up on things. Gemini season is going to start on May the 20th, and that will go until June the 20th. And usually when the sun's in Gemini, it does increase the amount of communications and things that we feel like we have to get done. However, let's talk about this Mercury retrograde coming up. Mercury goes retrograde on May the 10th, and this is a cycle that lasts until June 3rd, although we may feel some shadow phase effects as late as all the way through June 19th, but just know after June 3rd, things will start to pick back up again. This Mercury retrograde is going to be mostly in Gemini. However, the Taurus piece of the retrograde begins on May 24th. And so knowing that Mercury is the ruling planet of the sign of Gemini during these days, while we have Mercury retrograde in Gemini, miscommunications will be even more likely. They're already pretty likely during Mercury retrograde, but be really clear with your words, go back, clarify things with others, and it's a really productive time actually for writing projects, anything that you can just get in the zone and do on your own using your internal thought process without having to coordinate with other people. That's a fantastic use of the Mercury retrograde energy. When Mercury goes into retrograde in the sign of Taurus starting May 24th. It's also a good time to finish up those projects that you've started that require that patience. You know, maybe you got something going and you just sort of lost patience for it. I find Mercury retrograde in the sign of Taurus really good to help you just have that focus needed to finish whatever it was. So there are some positive things, but in general, Mercury retrograde, just watch out with your interactions with other people. Now, what's going to kind of amplify some of the unusual energy in the air in May is what's known as a moon wobble. Now, not all astrologers talk about this, but this was pretty big for Jan Spiller. I'm going to try to remind people about these moon wobbles because she always gave the updates. If you're a subscriber to janspiller.com, you always get a heads up on this. We're going to be feeling a moon wobble through May 8th to 18th. It's kind of exact on May the 13th. And moon wobbles stir emotional energy in the atmosphere. It has to do with the sun's angle to the lunar nodes. This moon wobble occurs in the sign of Taurus. It's conjunct the north node and opposite the south node. And this can create some tension between your needs and the needs of somebody close to you. And it's a time when you might be more likely to fall into some unhealthy behavior patterns from your past. So it's really helpful to stay self-aware and proactive during these days. Plus, we're having Mercury retrograde. So proceed with caution this month. Now, an exciting event on the same day that Mercury stations retrograde, we're going to have the planet Jupiter moving into the sign of Aries. This is kind of a big deal. Jupiter only changes signs about once a year. What it's doing this year is giving us sort of a sneak preview window of almost 6 months where we get to experience the early degrees of Jupiter in the sign of Aries. It's been cruising through Pisces all year. We had a sneak preview of Jupiter in Pisces back in 2021. And Jupiter in Pisces is a lot different. It's a dreamier energy. Jupiter expresses pretty well. It's the traditional ruler of Pisces, and it can help people kind of tune into their intuition and go with the flow. Now, Jupiter in Aries, very different kind of feel. It's high energy, it's thinking big and really wanting to take some action on these big ideas. Well, I just described all these retrogrades, maybe not the time to jump into something new. So what I'd recommend during this time period that we have Jupiter in Aries on top of a Mercury retrograde is to channel your energy again towards something that you need to finish, and you can start looking into ideas for the future. It's a time for big visioning, brainstorming without nailing down the final details or agreements. Later this summer, it's going to be awesome because we'll be out of the retrogrades. Jupiter stays in Aries through October 27th. So we have a nice stretch of this abundant energy for new beginnings. We'll get to do that over the summer months for Northern Hemisphere, winter for our friends down under, later in June, July, August, even part of September before we hit Mercury retrograde again. We'll worry about that then. But I encourage you to take advantage of some of this Jupiter and Aries energy, especially if you are an Aries person. Now, if you were born March 21st to the 29th, or you have around 0 to 8 degrees of Aries rising, for example, or maybe your moon degrees are 0 to 8 degrees Aries, something like this, you're going to get an extra boost during these months. And the good news for you is this is kind of a lucky transit, and it's going to come back because Jupiter has a retrograde cycle. And so as we start 2023, we will again get Jupiter back through those early degrees of Aries. So you're getting a double dose. And then other Aries people will get some of that Jupiter and Aries good mojo later on in 2023. Now, the big news also, I guess all of the news feels like big news for May, is a lunar eclipse. Okay, so we've had Mercury retrograde, moon wobble, Jupiter changing signs. Now we've got lunar eclipse in Scorpio at 25 degrees. This lunar eclipse is happening kind of nighttime on the West Coast, 9:14 p.m. Pacific time. For East Coast people, it's going to be 12:14 a.m. on May 16th. But right in that window, if you look up at night, we won't get to see the eclipse in the United States, but I know it's visible somewhere in the world. You'll have to check it out. But lunar eclipses always signify information coming to light, something coming to fruition, and usually it's a pretty bold realization that requires people to examine something that they haven't looked at, especially with the eclipse being in the sign of Scorpio, all things hidden. So it is going to be a time probably where information comes to the surface that you may or may not have wanted to hear. But the point of the eclipse is to get things examined so that you can make some sort of change or transformation. And if you have gotten anything started back at the last solar eclipse, which if you remember was in December, it was December 4th of 2021. This is sort of the corresponding lunar eclipse 6 months later. You might see some results about what you have been working on over the past 6 months. So there's always some positive things that come out of these eclipses, and sometimes there's things that we don't like to see, but it really is better to know. And the sign of Scorpio is all about the truth. So the truth may be revealed. We've got Venus in Aries most of the month. This is going to be really good for people who maybe want to get some physical activity going. Again, remember, we've got these retrogrades. You don't want to just go out and do something crazy that you've never done. But if you're resuming some physical activity that you used to do and trying to get back on track, it can actually feel really good. Venus rules what makes us feel good. And it's also kind of fiery for romance and love life. And so Venus in Aries is happening. We got Mars in Taurus most of the month. That's going to be, I think, a nice grounding influence with some of this other really active astrology that can help us, again, to channel our energies and do things thoroughly that need to get done. Mars will get to move into Aries on the 24th. It's going to spend most of June, I think all of June, in the sign of Aries. I'll talk about that in my June forecast. So yeah, try to harness Mars and Taurus while it's here and get through the methodical steps that need to be done to complete something. We have a new moon on May 30th, and this is at 9 degrees of Gemini. Anyone born on or around May 30th, or if they have around 9 degrees Gemini rising, this is a special new moon for you. There's probably a lot of new beginnings in store for you in the year ahead, but everybody can use this new moon to set intentions, and you can think Gemini themes, you know, things that have to do with making connections, improving your communication skills. Gemini rules advertising and marketing. If you've got something like that, you can really put out your intentions of what you'd like to manifest. And remember that with Mercury being retrograde, you will probably not see some progress until later in June, and you can even plan it that way so that you're not taking a big step until later. But this is the time to set the intentions at this May 30th new moon. So I hope you can make the most of May's astrology. As you can see, there's a ton of activity in the sky going on. So just keep yourself grounded as much as you can. And I will be back with your June overview. Have a great month. Hey there, I just wanted to pop back on and mention that after I made this video and I said I don't think the lunar eclipse is visible in the US, I thought, wait a minute, if it's happening at midnight, I'm sure that it is. So I double checked, it's true West Coast, because of the time of year. It will still be dark, but it looked like on the map, the whole eastern part of the US was the zone that the May 16th lunar eclipse was visible in the sky. So even people in the central time zone, you won't have to stay up quite as late. But on the East Coast, if you're up at midnight or before, you'll probably see some newspaper articles about it. I always think it's fun to look at the lunar eclipse. It's, if it's a clear night, it's pretty dramatic. So I wanted to add that in. I misspoke on the overview video. So if you're in the US, give it a shot. The eastern side, the west side, maybe not as visible. I'm going to still look for it. Okay.